Thunderbird 4 is go. FAB Thunderbird 4. Docking complete. Thunderbird 4 secured. Thunderbirds are go.
International rescue operates in a more technologically advanced future, but the principles behind its machines were at least partially inspired by the world of the mid-1960s. We examined the fact and fiction of the Thunderbird fleet. Though the Thunderbird machines were devised by Jerry Anderson, the design of the main craft came from his visual effects director Derek Meddings. Meddings was more than prepared to sacrifice feasibility for the sake of making the vehicles look good, but nevertheless, he spent hours researching developments in avionic, submarine and spacecraft engineering. He incorporated some of these innovations in his design: forward step swept wings, retractable wings and Soyuz-style propulsion methods made the machines seem futuristic but believable. The TV Century 21 comics and books published technical specifications that added to this verisimilitude, but how would the Thunderbird fleet would actually function in real life? In space, Thunderbirds 3 and 5. Thunderbird 3 is designed in the shape of a rocket that must overcome aerosols on its journey towards and beyond the Earth's atmosphere. Only the white ring in the centre and the top of the three Nacelle rockets compromise its otherwise streamlined shape. The three rockets were inspired by the Soviet Soyuz rockets of the 1960s. Having only three would have made the craft's forward move potentially unstable. If, for example, the ship were failed with 6 rockets and one of them were equipped with 6 rockets and one of them had failed, the opposite nacelle would be switched off in order to maintain the equal power on both sides. Thunderbird 3 remains in one piece from launch to re-entry, making it more sophisticated than today's spacecraft, for which they generally lose their thruster sections after takeoff. For example, the Saturn V rocket design used by NASA between 1966 and 1973 basically comprised a huge disposable fuel tank topped by a small Apollo capsule. The acceleration of a contemporary rocket would effectively increase the weight of the astronauts on board, requiring them to lie flat on their backs. There is no such convenience for the crew of Thunderbird 3. During takeoff, Scott, Alan and Tintin remain seated in their chairs. Thunderbird 3's launch from the Tracy Iron roundhouse is more dangerous than it looks, as the heat from the 3 rockets would almost certainly incinerate the building. The same fate would befall the swimming pool and villa beneath Thunderbird 1 when that vehicle launches into the air. On returning, Thunderbird 3 uses rockets to regulate its descent towards the roundhouse. The final stage of its landing is presumably computer controlled, given the position required the 3 nacelles to their cradle. International rescues other space vehicles Thunderbird 5. The surveillance satellite is the organisation's eyes and ears, but in order to function efficiently it would have to be part of a network. Thunderbird 5's position doesn't afford it full coverage of the Earth, so additional 3 satellites would be required to cover its blind spots, each maintaining a fixed orbit but in different orientations. Satellites don't remain stationary over the Earth but fly over different parts during their orbital motion. Thunderbird 3's docking procedure with Thunderbird 5 appears to be based on the methods of moon landing docks that were anticipated in 1965. Inserting the nose cone of Thunderbird 3 into the satellite is a good way for international rescue to exchange personnel through the rocket's wide hatch. The delicate manoeuvre is carefully controlled to ensure that Thunderbird 3 comes to a standstill before docking in order to avoid bumping the satellite out of orbit. It is never explained how Thunderbirds 3 and 5 appear to maintain artificial gravity for their crews whilst in space, so it must be assumed that this is another of Brains' engineering innovations. In the air, Thunderbirds 1 and 2. Jeff Tracy dispatches Thunderbirds 1 and 2 for terrestrial rescues. Thunderbird 1 is a rocket/aircraft hybrid, whilst Thunderbird 2 is a heavy transporter in the style of a similar aircraft manufactured by the Soviet Antonov Company after the Second World War. Thunderbird 1's rocket-style design is streamlined to facilitate supersonic flight. The design of Thunderbird 2 is more functional with a thick fuselage and a tail thruster block. Like the bulky engine positioned at the rear of Thunderbird 1, this would cause tremendous drag once airborne. During normal subsonic flights, both Thunderbirds 1 and 2 would attain lift through their wings. Both vehicles have flat wings, but lift is traditionally achieved through the wings that slope downwards. Whilst the engines provide forward thrust, such wings keep a plane airborne. Thunderbird 1's retractable wings slope backwards, whilst Thunderbird 2's slope forwards. This may seem eccentric, but both designs have potential to provide lift. Thunderbird 2's forward pointing wings would, however, move air towards the fuselage, making the vehicle more prone to rolling. Aircraft take off from a runway when the combination of engine thrust and wing design creates a lift that overcomes the vehicle's weight. Vertical takeoff and landing aircraft ascend and descend using engines that push the vehicle up and down as if it was a rocket. Thunderbird 1's VTOL design employs just one central engine. Which would lead pilot Scott Tracy to perform a precarious balancing act. Real-life VTOL aircraft are rather better equipped in this respect, and it's probably no coincidence that Thunderbird 1 was designed at a time where both NATO and the RAF were evaluating such aircraft for the first time. The Hawker Siddeley Kestrel entered service in 1964, with the Harrier jump jet following in 1966. Thunderbird 2's VTOL capabilities rely on 4 engines, although its launches from Tracy Island using a short runway. The length of the runway and the vehicle's shape and weight means it's questionable whether Thunderbird 2 will be able to gain sufficient lift to gain airborne in such a scenario. Thunderbird 2's VTOL lifts off from rescue sites are more credible and indeed faster, although its fuel expenditure must be enormous. Underwater Thunderbird 4. International Rescue Submarine. Looks authentic, but in fact it's the least plausible of all the Thunderbird vehicles. Most submarines are created in a cigar shape for a reason. This is the best designed to withstand deep seawater pressure. Thunderbird 4's shape would make it difficult to operate at significant depths. To stay level or rise, submarines maintain or expel water on board tanks. The heavier the tanks, the deeper the submarine will sink. Thunderbird 4 is a diminutive craft that appears to be packed full of rescue equipment that leaves little or no room for tanks that should occupy more than half its mass. Thunderbird 4's additive light trough appendage and its tools are perfect for Aquanaut's Thunderbird 4 to conduct underwater operations without leaving the submarine. This saves him having to wear a pressurized diving suit or to undergo lengthy decompression procedures when he's returning to the surface. Thunderbird 4 is often launched directly into the water from Pod 4 of Thunderbird 2. Such a launch would give a submarine of an estimated speed of 64 km per hour for its trajectory was roughly halted by the water. Car safety standards require airbags to inflate approximately a third of this speed following an impact, so it's likely that Gordon begins each journey with a massive headache. 50 years on from the launch of Thunderbirds, it's clear that Jerry Anderson and Derek Meddings were happy to embellish their creations with a degree of artistic license. If their machines have achieved iconic status, it's partly the result of their designs combine just enough plausibility with a compelling degree of wishful thinking.